start the lap. Next up is going to be turn number 3. Some people run it on the curb all the way in entry. Donka Volka not quite using that much of the road, but does bounce and bumble over the curbs at turn number 3. That's 4. Now we're in 5. Different lines available here as well. The Ferrari of Donka Volka going for that very, very flowing line all the way across the apex curve, back out the other side. Continues to keep it smooth, in fact, as we get onto the Mistral Straight as well. So this could be a decent lap coming in. Still Knudsen at the top for reference. He's got almost half a second in hand over Pateron in the Bentley, who does have the fastest first sector of anybody. Then it's Wheelot in 3rd spot, Aston Martin, Ford in 4th, and this is the Ferrari currently sitting ever so slightly further down the order. Donka Volka having been demoted to 14th whilst he's trying to put in this lap. And he needs a good one. The time was slipping away from him on the Mistral Straight, but he's pulled it all back through the sine curve at the end of the Mistral Straight, and now we're into this double right-hander out a little bit wide, I think, but he pulls it back for an apex, is able to get back on the power. This is the treble 4 of Nedorazov. Remember, this was the car we saw set the benchmark time right at the beginning of the session. Since then, hasn't been able to find any further improvement, but is up by 2, going on 0.3 of a second on this lap. Huge amounts of curb taken as they enter the Mistral Straight. We did not see that in the rookies last week. The confidence these drivers have is absolutely astonishing. He has gotten a slightly better exit, has Nedorazov onto the back straight this time round, and so Roman is on a charge here. He's putting his rivals under siege as the treble 4 gets towards the top end of the straight. Of course, last week the treble 4 was a V12 Vantage, which was absolutely flying along that straight. The V8 Vantage, no slouch, although out very, very wide as Nedorazov. Somehow he's kept it within track limits and found time. He's now 0.4 of a second up as he uses all the road through the double right-hander of Buso, which is a nearby town in that direction of the circuit. Hard on the brakes and curling, trail braking all the way through turn number 10. Now we're on to Garlaban curve. Garlaban, for reference, a mountain nearby just off of Marseille. So if you're going on holiday to Marseille, you could pick up a nice little trek there, but it's hoping to be a trek up the order for Nedorazov. He's on the brakes into the final corner, a little bit tighter on entry than he would have wanted to be, in all honesty, but he's still finding time. It's going to be a 1/10 of a second for Nedorazov. Doesn't improve him higher than he was, but he'll be encouraged by that. Townsend, in the meantime, that's the car you've got on screen right now. Matt Townsend in that 85 Mustang. Lovely livery, I must say. He's having a pretty good time of it thus far, having found himself up towards the top end of the order. 1:53.1 his best time, puts him as 1/10.5 or so away from the best time thus far. Matt Pryor is relatively calm. One of the Ferraris in the background certainly was not, as it goes absolutely flying off the road at the double right. I think we'll have hit the wall there, so that Ferrari will be resetting as we follow along with another one of our Matts, Matt Pryor, getting the power down out of that very tricky turn number 10. Keep an eye on that when we get to the race, because it's one of the few places where you could actually have a lazy slow speed spin. Mustang up into the final corner. There's not going to be any actual time loss to this Audi, unless the Audi comes back across. That was very close. Maybe some mental time loss there, although in theory the road was open as Matt Pryor cuts the beam, moves up from 26th into 22nd. In what is a pretty respectable lap time, remember, running in the semi-professional class. Here is Sergei Tamara, another one of our McLarens. I was about to say top place McLaren, but of course Jakob Knudsen at the top is our fastest McLaren. In fact, he's the fastest driver, full stop. So the 701 of Tamara making his way up the Mistral Straight. We've got 4 minutes left in the session, so a couple of laps available to those who are in the right part on the circuit. Tamara ought to be one of those. On this particular lap, is up by 3.5 Make that 4 as he's later on the brakes, but is then going to lose time as a result of it, as he's in a bit deep. The Simhaven Motorsport driver getting himself back on the power once more, sponsored by all sorts of brands that you will know and recognize. Other sim racing brands are available, of course, as he gets on the power once more. 0.3 of a second, the amount he's got in hand. That would put him up a good couple of positions, potentially into 5th here for Tamara, if he can hold it into the final corner. Hairpin right. The McLaren does not like the curb on the inside. He's done a good job of avoiding it all the way out to the white line. He's losing a touch of time, but it should still be a good improvement here for Sergei Sergei Tamara into 5th. That's a solid spot, head of the 3rd row as it stands, but with 3 minutes on the clock, you would not want to count anyone out. Tamara himself is going to get 2 more goes at this if the tyres permit. And they may not permit, because just as we cut away from that shot, he was losing the rear end through turn 2. He will have gathered it up, but that straight away has cost Tamara quite a bit of time on his next attempt, at least. This is the wonderful Fabian Hulot. We'll let somebody come into chat and update us if we've got that one wrong. But the 997, confusingly an Aston Martin, not a Porsche, is making its way down the Mistral Straight, and he too was about 0.2 of a second up when he came onto the straight. He's lost a couple of hundredths of that on the run towards the top end of the circuit and Sine Curve, but Sine Curve looks pretty solid, and indeed he's grasping that time back and more as we get in towards the very top end of the track. That 997 looks pretty planted. The front engine cars always do. And now it's a case of getting back on the power out the other side once more. It looks pretty good, to be honest. Far more planted than I was expecting. That Aston pretty torquey. The twin-turbo V8 can sometimes overwhelm the rear tyres, but he's done a great job of managing the torque, managing the traction. Wide entry line into the final corner. It'll actually set him up very nicely for the next run, even if it does lose him a bit of time on this lap. He's still on for an improvement, however, from 4th into 3rd. Stays on the 2nd row, but will now head it. We return to Tamara, who is on an absolute flyer. The McLaren, all sorts out a shape breaking for the final corner, but is half a second up. Is this enough to go into provisional pole position? It's going to be tight for Tamara. 2nd spot at the moment, a 10th, and just a wee bit more away. He's got one more go at this, and we know this time in turn 2 because we watched him lose it just in the background of a shot 1 lap ago, but he pulls off to the side. 2nd at best for Tamara, and there are cars behind improving. That includes the Ford Mustang on your screen right now. Callum Jones, the number 48, racing for Toga Motorsport in that lovely green Mustang. All chunks of curb being taken there. It's like me with a cake on a Sunday as he gets the nose in to the left-hander, bumbles over the curbs. You can see that suspension holding up really nicely on the Mustang. Of course, one of the newer GT cars in existence, only came out into the racing fray last year. Jones piling it to perfection, almost 0.2 of a second up. He will stay in 6th spot, though, albeit he too has one more go at this as the time continues to tick away. Just 10 seconds remaining now as Jones gets himself into turn 1, back out the other side, and has once again found time. His fastest lap clearly has left him a little bit of margin in that particular sector. It's just a question of can he hold on to it through the remainder of the lap. The clock has hit 0. Limburgs in the Nissan will be 8th at best. Amato will be 9th at best. And again, cars behind them improving all the time. The track conditions coming towards them. Here is Christoph Peterson, currently 5th in a Bentley of all cars, coming in towards those last couple of corners. Another very pretty set of colours on that car at the very least. I'll be honest, my eyesight can't quite make out what's putting them together as he accelerates out the final corner. 10th and a half up, so he is at the moment. Was 5th, stays 5th, albeit the gap came down between Christoph Peterson and the cars just up the road of him. Here is Wazowicz. Wazowicz not finding a whole lot of time, pulls off the road. He was already about half a second down on that lap, so the Toga Ford Mustang will not improve. We're then in turn looking at Pateron in the number 16 Ferrari, one of the last cars to try and find some time, and he's exactly on top of his best lap thus far, but he finds time on the brakes into the final corner. Can he hold it on the run to the line? He only needs a tiny amount to get that one put together. Meanwhile, we look towards Gabriel Schmidt in the 55 Ford Mustang. Schmidt at the moment down in 25th spot, but is more than 0.7 of a second to the good relative to his own personal best. He'll be looking to find a way through on the likes of Kaperkovic, Pryor, possibly Pirat as well as he gets the power down out the final corner. There was margin to spare there, but he stays off the curb. That'll stop the traction control from kicking in. He's still 0.6 to the good, and finds a good number of places there from 25th into 20th. He can ask for much more than that out of a last lap dash, and so it will be 20th at best. We'll bring you the full grid in just a moment when the car is lined up, but it is going to be Jakob Knudsen onto pole position. Did not have a single purple sector for reference. Just put it together across the whole lap. He ended up taking pole by less than a tenth, in fact, from Fabian Huilot and then Sergei Tamara. So then, we are all set up to go through the grid with the traditional Toga Motorsport grid walk, something I myself, as my first performance here on Toga Motorsport, I've been dreading a little bit because we see all sorts of commentators use Toga trip up over this one. So I'm sure all the regular fans are ready and raring to see exactly how I cope with this one. You would hope relatively well, although it'll be a question of trying to get all the right names in all the right places. So 31st position, that is where you'll find Brandon Fuller. He is supposed to be sharing the row with Pawlowski, but we can't quite make out where Pawlowski is. In fact, there he is. He's just one step further back as it stands right now. In turn, it would be really good if I was able to access the race control. There we go. Much better. That's going to allow us to actually know who is who. So we've got Pawlowski, then Fuller. In turn, in 30th position, we've got a BMW. First of those we're going to see in the grid. That's Budko, alongside a graduate from the Rookie Championship, Sadok, in the 299 Porsche. He had a pretty solid performance here at Paul Ricard just last week, in fact, although held up amongst traffic certainly didn't help him. Then we've got a Ferrari 488 Challenge in the hands of Roth at the number 488 going from 28th, sharing that row actually with Rhys Aindo in that wonderful Gulf Toga Racing Aston Martin. We get the first of the Lamborghinis up next, and in fact it's an all Lamborghini row because we've got the 970 of Kapurkovic in 25th, Kuth in 26th with the 63. And the next row is all front engines because you get Pirat in the 456 BMW 23rd. He's just ahead of Matt Pryor in the number 72 Ford Mustang. Going forwards one further row, it's another couple of graduates from the Rookie Championship. You've got Wouter Gozai starting from 22nd, Josh Wood going from 21st. Then in turn, it's Schmidt and Donkovolka on row number 10. That's the 51 Ferrari and the 55 Mustang. Forward to that, we'll get Le Guin and Bata Glynn in the 550 McLaren and the 403 BMW. Sterenberg in the Nissan goes from 16th. 15th is Merle in the 612 Ferrari. And getting towards the top 10, we'll sign in 14th and 101 Ford of Taran, the 16 Ferrari of Pateron, and Oroshkin and Vazovics. They're just outside that top 10 on row number 6 in a Ford and a Ford Mustang and a BMW, respectively. Nadorzov, we saw a couple of clips of him in that qualifying session. He starts out those top 10 from row number 5. Mato in 9th spot in the 103 Ferrari. Row number 4 is where you'll find Martin Varga, of course, a past Rookies Championship, making the step all the way up into pros now. He, in his Mustang, is just ahead of Limburgs in the 420 Nissan. In turn, we've got Peterson and Jones, 5th and 6th. Row number 2 is where you'll find Sergei Tamara and Matt Townsend in a McLaren and a Ford. And in turn, it's a McLaren and an Aston Martin on the front row. Huilot ever so slightly behind Jakob Knudsen at the head of the field. 2 McLarens in the top 3 then, an Aston Martin, a Ford and a Bentley complete your top 5. We've got a Nissan in 8th, a Ferrari in 9th, and everybody else in tow. We're set up 90 minutes of racing. There is a pit stop in the middle. The window will be open for 10 minutes worth of time. In that pit stop, you must take tires, you must take some fuel as well, although exactly how much fuel is up to you. So we could see a few cars starting heavy to try and minimize the amount of time they spend stationary in the pits. A lot of these cars with about 120 litres available to them, so they could make a good effort at getting a long way through and minimizing how much time they spend in that pit stop. We do have a couple of penalties, or rather a couple of warnings. Car number 403 caught a warning for minor contact, as did car number 27. You'll see Pirat in the 456 BMW that it was +5 seconds for minor contact, evidently ever so slightly less minor than the other two who got away with it somewhat. Jakob Knudsen at the head of the field, controlling the pace then, using a GT technique that is becoming increasingly popular all the way across the world of real-life GT racing, as well as the sim, which is using the brakes to heat up the brake, heat up the inside of the wheel, and let that temperature radiate through into the rubber of the tyre, the carcass of the tyre, and in the air inside as well. I have no doubt that we'll see just a bit of weaving in a moment or two, else that McLaren is going to be very, very vulnerable into the first couple of corners, because the likes of Hulot and indeed Sergei Humara behind will be pushing hard to try and find a way through. One dynamic to keep an eye out for here as well, of course, is it's the first race of the season, a long season, so it is. It's going to take us to places such as the Red Bull Ring, Suzuka. We're going to go to Bathurst and Spa as well, all the top tracks being included. But what you might want to do is survive these opening couple of laps, because not only have you got 90 minutes here, you've got a full season worth of racing to consider as well. That could particularly be a factor for the Aston Martins, which if you ace the start, will get off the line just as well as anything else. If you have a slight lag in your reaction time, you'll find that the Aston Martin is prone to bogging down off of these rolling 2x2 starts. Through the penultimate corner we go then. A lovely big field we have on offering. It is Jakob Knudsen from pole position in the number 20 McLaren. Alongside him is the 997 Aston Martin, with a McLaren and a Ford Mustang lurking to pick up the pieces. All eyes go to the lights. We got 5 red lights ablaze. We wait, and we go racing here at Paul Ricard. And as predicted, that Aston Martin has had a nightmare of a start. Already Wheeler dropping down the order. He's been mugged by 1, 2, 3, make it 4 or 5 of them. Knudsen, on the other hand, from pole position, great start. A little bit tentative on the brakes as the treble 4 Aston Martin goes sailing around the outside. That may yet work out quite well for him. Knudsen gets the perfect getaway from pole position, however. Sergei Tumara, keep an eye on him, because that car has started incredibly quickly from Sim Haven Racing. Is the number 20. Love the livery on that one. Yellow and white, simple but effective. He's going to lead the field onto the Mistral Straight for the first time. The question will be, will he lead them off of the Mistral Straight for the first time? Because just half a second back is Sergei Tumara. The pair of them already trying to break away from the rest of the field as they accelerate onto the Mistral Straight. Here comes in the slipstream Tumara. That slipstream is so effective, particularly when you're catching one of the slowest cars in the field, a McLaren 720S. And indeed, already halfway up the straight, the lead changes hands. It's Tumara who hits the front for the first time of asking a lead change on the opening lap. It may yet turn back, because here comes Knudsen, tucked into the slipstream. The gap is 0.2. The gap is coming down to 0.1. Is he going to be brave? Not quite brave enough into Sine Curve, where they ride the apex all the way through. Can they possibly pull off a move that we saw a couple of times in rookies, where you just slide your way up the inside? He's not close enough, so he'll instead lock himself in. Will Knudsen get a good exit out of the corner? It's about catching that 701 at the right place, and he's good on the brakes, runs it deep. That'll pick up a lovely 8 apex. Although, in the end, he actually slid the rear tyres, which certainly didn't help him at all. Callum Jones has gained a spot at the expense of the Bentley of Peterson. Jones into 4th, Peterson into 5th, just off of your camera. But at the front, it is Knudsen who started from pole, and yet has work to do as he gets on the brakes, turns right into the final corner. If he can stay there, the slipstream is going to be all his. And in reality, these two McLarens might be best off working together, because if Townsend in that Mustang gets anywhere near them, it's going to be like watching a racehorse run past, well, me, put simply, as we hit the brakes into turn 1 for the second time of asking. The cones get demolished, as is customary here at Paul Ricard. Both of the McLarens riding the curb in the second part of the Glassworks S, and it's a question of getting late on the brakes. The 20 car Knudsen super tight to the back of this other McLaren. The pair of them actually gapping away from Townsend just a little bit in this twisty stuff where the McLaren mid-engined, it's poised, it's ready to go. The front engine, well, Murata is ready to go behind us, sideways just for a moment, gets Jakob Knudsen. That's not going to help him in the slightest because he needs every dose of slipstream he can get. These McLarens possibly hoping to work together ever so slightly as they bounce and bobble over the bumps here on the Mistral Straight. Already 3 minutes of this race gone, and it's to the outside for Jakob Knudsen. A late jink to that left-hand side of the road. He may not actually have a clear run into Sine Curve at the end of the straight here as they break for turn 8. It's neck and neck, door to door. They'll be staring each other in the eyes as they come round the right-hander, and still Tamara holds firm. As predicted, any sort of fight has brought the Mustang to play up the inside for Matt Townsend. He puts a nose in where nobody wants it, but he's prying the door open. It'll leave him on the outside, however, for turn 10, and he thinks better of that because lurking behind him, the Toga Academy car, or the Toga Motorsport car, I should say, of Callum Jones is sitting right there. Then you've got the Bentley of Peterson in 5th, Hulot is 6th, Limburg's the Nissan, a fantastic 7th at this stage, and indeed you can just see it out the background of the shot. And in fact, all the cars are running right together down to a roundabout. Amato in the 103 Ferrari in 9th at the moment. Anybody's game after 2 laps then, as we get ourselves moving on towards the next one. Hulot will be ruining that start, won't he? Because the Aston Martin is well down in the order. You saw him in the background for a moment just pull out of the slipstream of Peterson, but that Bentley just a touch too strong at this stage as there's a battle getting on for 3rd position. Townsend has got to keep a watching brief on Callum Jones here, if not an active defense. Callum Jones pries the door open. They'll trade it back and forth once more in the background of your shot, but we'll now think about the lead because they've used that battle behind them to open up 1.6, make it 2.3 seconds almost as they come onto the back straight, and they can play slipstream games once more. Here is Knudsen. We ride on board with a yellow number 20 car in the slipstream up towards the lovely slipstream sticker, I think, just telling Knudsen where to go on the back of the 701 McLaren. Again, it's to the outside, however, for Jakob. This didn't work for him a lap ago. I reckon he's probably running just a touch more downforce than the McLaren next to him. That's going to allow him to absolutely throw the car through Sine Curve at the end of the Mistral Straight. He's on the outside line, he's got the momentum. He will not have the apex, however, because it's MotoGP style. Block pass from Jakob, and he's able to regain that lead that he lost for but a brief moment, as in the background it really is chopping and changing. Callum Jones was up to 3rd on that straight in the subsequent corners. He's back down to 4th once again, as he's lost out to Matt Townsend. He's lost out to Hulot, and Wheelot is closing in. He's passing a touch of contact there with a Mustang. That looked like 2 into 1 to me, but it'll be up to the stewards to decide whether that was pushed to pass. At the very least, on circuit, the Aston Martin is ahead. Let's have another look at this then from the heli camera. The Aston Martin's up the inside, and to be honest, I don't think there's much in that. The Mustang goes for an apex. The Aston braked a touch earlier than I was expecting, and there's a rather inconsequential touch of front bumper to rear. It does put that 997 Aston of Fabian Wheelot back up into 3rd position at his home race here, the Frenchman at Paul Ricard. And he'll be ruining that start, however, because it's lost him almost 2.5 seconds, if not slightly more, well, to the eye at least, relative to the cars ahead. And you'll have to keep an eye out for these Mustangs because there's absolutely no chance Callum Jones doesn't give this a go down the back straight. It is a good exit from the Aston Martin. Runs it through turn number 6, carries the momentum through turn number 7. The question is just, Will it matter as he begins to weave? He'll have to be careful with that as the Ford Mustang closes up, because there are rules here at Toga Motorsport relating to how many moves you're allowed to make when it becomes excessive weaving versus sportsman weaving. And now, with the Mustang right on the back of him, he will have to pick a line. He chooses the racing line. The Mustang instead opting for a bit of a bump draft, I think, down the back end of that straight. They ease themselves both away from Martin Varga, who you may be used to seeing in something other than a front-engine Mustang. If you followed Toga Motorsports, is up the front. It's all action once again. Knudsen in the number 20, showing an overlap, showing a wheel to the inside, and then the outside of Sergei Tumara of Simhaven Racing. But it's still the Simhaven car that leads the way from that number 20 machine. The pair of them lapping very, very quickly indeed. The last lap, despite fighting each other, was a 1:54.4. That said, it was invalid, so the fastest lap at the race is a little bit slower than that. As I say that, they both go quicker once again. It's a 54.3 for Knudsen, notably, who takes just a bit out of the gap ahead of him. And keep an eye on Fabian in that 997 Aston Martin. He's just done the fastest lap of the race, a 1:53.975. He did that without the slipstream, let's remember, although there was a touch of a, what should we say, bump draft down the back end of the straight to give him a helping hand. But at the very least, the gap between your lead pair and third position is coming down as we get penalties coming up. These will all be for stuff related to the start of the race. And remember that any penalty on the opening lap is doubled in its severity. That's a standard stewarding rule here at Toga, designed to discourage drivers from making any sort of silly mistakes and encourage them to be very, very clean at the start. Big impact is going to be Callum Jones, the number 48 Mustang, running in fourth position, 10 seconds worth of penalty. He will serve that in the stop as the McLarens at the front play the game with each other once again. It is still the 20 of Knudsen. Your pole sitter, let us not forget, who is trying to close in on Sergei Tumara, was very quick in qualifying. Couldn't quite get himself on the front row, but capitalized on a slow starting Aston Martin. And since then has been not quite defensive, but possibly discouraging a move from Knudsen, making it so that if Knudsen was to go for it, it would actually just drop the pair of them backwards. And with, well, an hour and 20 minutes on the clock, it certainly makes sense to race with your head at the moment. Racing with the heart will come when we're about an hour further into this one, as it's front engine galore. The 101 Aston Martin of Kairolo Taran initially looked like he was ahead of his fellow Ford, however, is not able to get that move completed, at least not for now, as Vajovic goes around the outside. Keep an eye on Josh Wood getting involved in this as well. We know that Josh Wood loves a fight, and he loves to stick his nose in to try and gain an opportunistic move, as it's Vazovic on the inside, just about completing that one in towards turn number 1. Squeezes the door shut on the 101 Ford Mustang, which could leave that Mustang just a hint visible to the cars behind if he's not careful. Is Josh Wood having a go? No, the 22 McLaren not close enough into turn number 3, nor 4, nor 5. And in a McLaren, I can speak from personal experience here and tell you that you are far better off sitting and waiting for the Mistral straight. Let's take a moment and check in with Brandon Fuller. The Brit, for reference, is lapping really quite well. His lap times last time through was a 59, not his best lap. His laps before that, however, were down in a 1:58, which is pretty solid compared to what we were seeing last week at Paul Ricard here on Toga Motorsport. Brandon Fuller, of course, racing effectively with just one side of his body as part of an impairment that he experiences day in, day out. So it is a fantastic effort from Brandon, showing just that sim racing is for everybody, and he's, I bet you, having a whole lot of fun out there. He's actually not that far ahead of Pavlovsky, who I'm sure would love to have an intra-McLaren battle if he can for the top 30. Further up the order, we've got Roth in the 488. That slightly older Ferrari lacks downforce compared to Merle's 296 that is chasing him. To be specific, he will have about 20% less downforce than the Ferrari chasing him. So that 488, the white car with the blue and red stripe up the middle, doing a fantastic job. I suspect in the balance performance he will have ever so slightly more power than the 296 to help him compensate, but it was never an easy car to drive, and with something far more grippy behind you, I'm sure the pressure won't help in the slightest. Let's not forget that Roth does have a 20-second penalty. As we got further down the order, we saw a few more of those. Drivers at the back, of course, far more likely to be involved in incidents because the Pat Constantine is up on them and does not do them any favours. This is the battle at the front. Your top two, a second and a half clear of third position down. That may seem like quite a bit, just 13 minutes into this race. However, note that at one stage it was in excess of 3 seconds. So over the last couple of laps, laps 5 and 6 in particular, it has been coming down. This lap number 7, the Aston Martin we ride on board with sits in third position. That of Callum Jones' Mustang is catching. It's quite a big car, but it gets bigger and bigger and bigger still as they get up towards turn number 8. Is he able to make a move? No, Stetson beside. He's going to try and push that Aston Martin through the top end of the straight. But the Aston, I tell you what, absolutely planted through the fast right. Out a touch wide, I think, through the long double right, but it's close enough to open up the margin over those Ford Mustangs once again. On this lap as well, I think the gap is coming down yet more, actually, between Hulot and the cars ahead. It's actually to about a second between second and third now as that continues to minimise at the head of the field as that BMW Battaglan. Bruno gets all sorts of out of shape there. The rear tyre is complaining. He was trying to set up a move on the Lamborghini Huracan up ahead. In the end, he's actually going to lose a position here. I don't suppose that's Donkervelka is. Donkervelka on a really good lap here. The 51 Ferrari for Toga Racing closes all the way up. Not quite able to capitalise, however, and if anything, you ought to keep an eye on Pirat, who we know loves a race around this circuit. Slipstream galore, in fact. Bruno in the slipstream of Kuth up the road. Donkervelka might just get a distant tow from the BMW. Donkervelka's going to absolutely send it into turn number 1. I mean, look how much that gap closed through just one corner. He does lose again on the exit, so possibly just differing driving styles, as Battaglan turns his eyes ahead and starts to think about offense once more rather than defense. He's gone very deep. He's hit the Lamborghini as a result. I tell you what, Kuth will be aggrieved, and he will have some justification in that gravity. Here comes the 403 BMW. We're riding on board in replay. Brakes late. Gets the nose to the inside, but I mean, it's not like the gap was closing. There simply was not a gap there. There will be a penalty for that, probably quite a severe one. And to be honest, Bruno won't be able to have any complaints. He is still running, having dropped down the field now behind Sterenberg, I suspect that is, as we return to the front once more. The 701 leading the way. Last time through did a 53.9, which is properly quick. The best lap of the race, however, was set on the previous tour by the car in third position, a 153.735 set by Fabian in that 997 Aston Martin. There's a touch of oversteer coming onto the pit straight there for Tamara. Does that leave him vulnerable? It doesn't, because I'm pretty certain Knudsen's running more rear wing on that McLaren. He can stay there in the slipstream relative to Tamara, but he's not able to get alongside. The overspeed is maybe a mile an hour, a couple of miles an hour, but it's nothing significant. And so the move is going to have to come, you suspect, in Sector 3. Stay close down the back straight, carry the speed through Sine Curve, and then you're looking possibly into Turn 9. A favourite of mine when it comes to overtaking around this place at the very least. Turn, however, Knudsen seems to have struggled through, well, the bottom end of the circuit, the top end of the circuit, depends which way your track map is, but through 3, 4, 5, and 6, Knudsen was falling away towards the clutches, actually, of Fabian in the 997 Aston Martin. The tow from half a second back exists, but it's certainly not as strong, so Knudsen could be a touch vulnerable here as they run up the Mistral Straight. We've gone past where Formula 1 would have taken its chicane in years gone by. And now we're approaching the fast right-hander of Sine Curve, turn number 8. swing it into the right-hand side. It's gone from 2 for the lead, for 3 for the lead now, because here comes the Aston Martin. Fabian super, super close, drifting up the inside. This is what we love to see. It'll be a block pass on the apex. It opens up the exit for him. It should be advantage Aston Martin, but somehow Jakob Knudsen is holding on for second place. He's got the inside at 10. And he's just about covered off Fabian, but you feel like that's going to be a matter of time, particularly given that if they fight amongst themselves, Sergei Tamara is going to wave goodbye to them. He's found a half a second in this sector alone as they hit the brakes into the final corner. Here comes the Aston Martin once again. This surely going to be a challenge in towards turn number 1. It is nose to tail. You could barely fit a piece of paper between the pair of them. The Dane under pressure here as they accelerate down towards the Glasswork S. Not close enough is Fabian in the 997 Aston Martin. He'll reset and try again. The McLaren should be strong, you'd think, through the S, although if anything, it's actually the V8 Vantage with the advantage on traction as he shows a nose to the inside. Not quite close enough. Thinks better of an aggressive move because it's easy to forget that Callum Jones isn't too far back. With Callum Jones, you then get a whole train, the likes of Martin Varga, Matt Townsend, Peterson, Limburgs, they're all there or thereabouts. As a huge amount of oversteer there for the 20 McLaren. Surely this is job done. Lock and key, signed, sealed and delivered for Fabian and the Aston Martin. You could get them under a blanket right now as they come onto this back straight. There will be a whiff of a slipstream, but little more of it than that. As wafting up alongside comes Fabian in the 997 Aston Martin. Here we go then. It's going to be the outside line for the V8 Vantage. Actually, we know that's Jakob Knudsen's preferred line because it's what he chose when he was on the offense. Defensively, he's on the inside. And he's able to hold off once more. Here comes the Aston for a second bite of the cherry. However, late on the brakes, squirming around. The McLaren's got the advantage, but it's here in the second part of the double right where the Aston's able to close in. But it's very much what we saw one lap ago. Can the Aston brake late enough to have a slight gain around the outside? No, not quite. Doesn't quite get it in line for the cutback either, and so it's line astern once more, or the pair of them costing themselves time hand over fist relative to the cars ahead. Whilst we've been looking at that, Martin Varga, I believe, has managed to get his way up ahead of Callum Jones in the old Toga Racing affair for 4th position. He has indeed. So the former rookies champion moving up the order as here comes Fabian in the 997. He's going to be close once more. To the inside he shows the nose, leaves off the brake just a little bit. It's going to be a squeeze. Good awareness there from Jakob Knudsen, who was aware of the threat, left the door open when Fabian arrived late in the braking zone. As a result, it's yet another corner gone, yet another opportunity passed. It's another sector where the gap between second and the leader is going to open up just a little bit, and those Ford Mustangs are well and truly a factor in this battle now. Your leader is Sergei Tamara. He got himself to the head of the field having started on the second row. He, for a while, had a lot of pressure from Jakob Knudsen, but since the Aston Martin number 997 has come to play, instead it's now, well, what's about to become an all-out brawl, you have to suspect, for second place. Remember, this was a 90-minute race. There'll be a pit stop in the middle. We've got 2 different classes in this as well. We're looking at the pro battle for the overall lead. Amato leading in the semi-pro, slightly further down the order, is now the opportunity for a change for 3rd position in the pros. Not quite yet, although we know how much Fabian loves this right-hander, and he's a bit closer on entry this time. Surely that's the move done. He's out of shape. He's correcting the oversteer. He's off the road. The McLaren's back up the inside. You can't make this up. Jakob Knudsen will not give up. To the inside looks the Aston Martin. Once again, not close enough. That's 2 laps in a row now where Fabian wasn't close enough to make the move, and on the 3rd, you thought he had it all given towards him, but he was not able to get the British car slowed down enough. And as he drifted wide, back underneath came Jakob Knudsen, who himself drifts wide on the exit. That'll kick in the traction control. But to the outside once again for turn number 1, Fabian is forced. He is going to give it the squeeze, however, staying in the middle of the road, making sure that they're both on a tight entry line. He's got his nose ahead. He's got his whole car ahead as they hit the brakes. second position now for Fabian in the 997 Aston Martin. The McLaren tries to retaliate straight away, bite back immediately, but in doing so, he's just cost himself time. Here comes Martin Varga, former Rookies champion, graduated into the pro class. Varga up the inside for third position, can't make it stick. Jakob Nunsen knows better than that. You can't help but feel that Jakob is costing himself quite a lot of time here, because now the likes of Pateron in the Bentley are getting involved. There's the Nissan not too far back, actually losing a touch of time, but nowhere near as much as he was before these guys started battling, as once again it's the McLaren that lacks a little on top line speed that leads them onto the Mistral straight, having lost 3/4 of a second to Fabian in the first sector alone. Fabian setting his sights on the race leader. Martin Varga setting his sights on third position. The roaring Mustang powers its way, using every single pound of American muscle to the outside, however, through sine curve. Won't make that one stick. Is the McLaren vulnerable into the double right? Certainly not. And if anything, it's Martin Varga who has to take a slightly defensive line. Keep an eye out here for Matt Townsend, who shows a nose to the inside of Callum Jones. Callum Jones in the second of your Toga cars has to go defensive. Does make the defense work, however. Driver of the day, you'll see the graphic for it up there on the screen. That means that you guys can get involved. I would recommend waiting a little while, but if you're only going to be around for some of the stream, why not have a vote? You can do so with the following. You're going to put !vote, space, and then the car number of the driver you think should be driver of the day. That's !vote, space, then the car number. So if I wanted to vote for Martin Varga, I'd be car number space 86. You can do that on YouTube and on Twitch. Unfortunately, it's not available if you're watching it along on TikTok. Otherwise, you get one vote per platform. So if you're watching on TikTok, maybe get YouTube and Twitch open as well, so that you can support the drivers you love. Out front is Sergei Tamara. He's leading the way by a significant margin. Second place Fabian, however, does have the fastest lap of the race, down to a 1:53.582. And a vote already in for driver of the day, coming into Vladimir Beluga, who was a fan favourite in the Rookies, if I remember correctly, last week. Was picked to driver of the day there. Maybe this is the one, as one of the Toga Ford Mustangs was well out of shape coming onto the Mistral straight. We can take a quick touch in with our semi-pro class. We had a change for the lead there a little while ago. It is now going to be Le Guian Tepe leading the way for Rebellion Autosport in the 550. The car behind him is a Pro when you see that BMW in shot, and in turn it's Wazowicz in the Toga all-green Ford Mustang that is second in class. If you look slightly further back in shot, you may well just be able to make out Taran. We touched on the Ukrainian earlier on. Taran currently running third in that semi-pro classes. There's a clean but maybe a little hard move put in by Wazowicz. That's not for positioning class. That's him past the number 134 BMW. It does, however, mean that the next car is going to be for the class lead. So the Toga Esports driver looking pretty good. Sterenberg in the Nissan's got company. Meanwhile, as this huge contact, was that Pirat? It must have been Pirat, who's gone off and is in the wall hard. We will take a second look at this one. Pirat on a very tight entry line. Holds it, holds it, holds it. You'll feel he was somewhat squeezed there on the exit, but the contact comes later. To be honest, I reckon that could sit with Sterenberg. We'll wait for the stewards to make their decision. If it was with Sterenberg, he'll get a penalty in due course, but it looked like the Nissan was just creeping back towards a racing line that was never, ever going to be available. And in fact, that Godzilla-esque car getting just a little bit sideways through the final sector as well. Big benefactor in all of that, of course, the BMW that the pair of them were racing, that being Bataglin, who we saw involved in strife earlier on. Martin Varga, however, has lost quite a lot of time whilst we were looking ever slightly further down the order. Varga now 1.7 seconds away from the back of Jakob, and in doing so, a podium position. So we'll see whether or not that comes back down again. But to me, that senses that the two Toga Esports cars, the 86 and the 48, were having a bit of a ding-dong. Despite the fact that you'd expect them to work together, and indeed despite that Callum Jones has a 10-second penalty to come at the pit stop. Varga a little bit out of shape as he tried to slow it down in the end of the straight. This for the semi-pro lead. Your current leader, and indeed leader for a little while, is the Seppi in the 550 McLaren. But Wazowicz, having got through very quickly on a car from the pro class, is immediately challenging for that semi-pro class lead. Of course, they will score maximum points. This is the championship they will be fighting in all the way through the season, and so we're beginning to get an eye on who our big players are going to be as we keep seeing some Driver of the Day votes coming in. Good to see the support for some of the drivers who have been in all sorts of action on the way through this one. Still Seppi for Rebellion, leading in that semi-pro class, the 550, looking absolutely glorious in the sunlight. Bruno Battiglin, the 403, has now been caught by Sterenberg, who's received a 20-second penalty. I think we all know why that has come through, having just seen the incident mere moments ago. I'm curious to see how this Nissan performs, because it has quite a bit of weight taken out. Rather than weighing the same as the Titanic, it is weighing maybe the same as your average yacht as he comes down the pit straight and onwards in towards turn number 1. First drive-through come in as well, and that's actually going to go to the 3rd place car in semi-pro, Taran, the Ukrainian, picking up a drive-through, which would imply, we'll need to check this, but it would certainly imply he's had some sort of track limits infringement there, because that's what you get when you go beyond your allotted number, and having done that in half an hour, he's got twice that to race yet, so we have to be careful that he doesn't get something like a stop-go 30, because a drive-through is not good. Stop-go 30 is a major race ender. Here comes the Nissan, however. Sterenberg looking for a way up to get ever closer. 6th position in class is on the line. Both of these guys with penalties means that they could well be near each other come the end of the race. No defensive shapes thrown by Bruno Battiglin, the Brazilian, opting for the racing line because he knows he's got a penalty to come, and it's all about optimizing the race time from this point onwards. If you've just joined us, this is the brand new GT3 Pro Series. We're in Season 1 of it here at Toga Motorsport, and it is the fastest drivers we've got on offer. And the fastest driver on circuit of late has been that 997 Aston Martin, Fabian, all the way through from a terrible start, now up to the lead of the race. He's passed Sergei Tamara for that lead, and Tamara immediately under pressure from a resurgent Jakob Knudsen. It's come together at the head of the field, and the Aston Martin, having made the move, is capitalizing on this McLaren, well, some sort of infighting, you'd have to say, because the two cars from the same mark are already almost a second back from the Aston Martin that leads the way, so they're going to get no hint of a slipstream. And guess what's lurking behind them? Martin Varga. We expected he would get his head down. The Mustang has come to play for the top 3. It is Fabian who's just taken the race lead. That's the Aston Martin at the top of shot. Then for second place, we got the two McLarens coming over closer. Jakob Knudsen to the outside. He's tried this twice already against Tamara. It's not worked on either occasion, but this time he looks to have his nose just that little bit further ahead. Late on the brakes, Knudsen finally gets the move done against Sergei Tamara. That you would have thought would be for the lead, if not for Fabian carving them up earlier on in this very same lap. Out a little bit wide goes Jakob, and it does leave the door just for a moment ajar, at least in terms of optimism, for Sergei Tamara. And Tamara's got the door well and truly wide open on the exit there, because Jakob did not get it stopped for turn number 10 here at Paul Ricard. However, as they get in towards Tower Turn and then Bridge Bend to round out the lap, it is still Knudsen who holds on to second place. Now, whilst he was catching the leaders once more, I suspect he was going pretty well with Fabian, so we'll have to keep an eye on his lap times. He has in this race dipped into the 153s, so too has Fabian out front, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Thank you very much for the follow, Salvatore Amato. Amato, you were running in this race, I believe, so in fact leading class if I recall correctly, so it's a bit of a shame to see Salvatore into chat, but at the very least, thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully we'll get you out for round number 2. Round number 2, of course, in just a week. So if you're enjoying this, make sure you set the alarms. You get the reminder on your phone for what's coming up, because there are some great tracks. As into the pits comes Kairilo Taran. This will be for the drive-through. You get 3 laps to serve it, if memory serves. And so he will drop down the order, having been running in the top 3 within that semi-pro class. Here's the second of our Nissans. Tell you what, I didn't get a proper look at who that was on the bonnet, but I'm sure we'll get a good look as we get into the race, possibly Liam Neeson, as Limburgs makes his way up towards the top end of the track. He's under pressure here from Nedorazov, who of course gave us our first sight of Paul Ricard in that qualifying session. Pirat doing well in the driver of the day. Nedorazov gets a vote in there as well, as the Treble 4 V8 Vantage closes up to the back of the Nissan, but is not quite close enough to make a challenge for position. That, for reference, currently a squabble over 8th position, both overall and in the pro class. If you were watching the Rookie Championship last week and in the weeks prior, you will have become used to, for example, there we had the rookies and the AMs being the top class. The rookies were mixing it up with the AMs at various points. Here, quite a clear divide, as 9 of the top 10 are in our pro category, and lap times showing just why that is the case. We saw another follow come up there just a moment ago. Thank you very much for that, as we take a chance to go back down to Donka Volka. A lot of Toga Racing Ford Mustangs. Donka Volka in a Toga Racing 296. Of course, another one of the more recent GT3 cars. This 296 got a 2.9 litre twin turbo V6. The V slightly more open than you'll find in most other cars. It's at 120 degrees between the cylinders. That optimizes the turbo positioning for weight distribution. They thought about everything. 20% more downforce than the 488, and behind it, closing in all the time, is the McLaren 720S Evo of Josh Wood. A fan favorite here at Toga Motorsports is Josh Wood, because you get action every single place you see him. Similar 4-litre twin-turbo V8, however, for Josh Wood. Unrestricted, it would have 740 brake horsepower, although it won't quite have all of that. And we saw the dual wishbone suspension coming into use for just a moment. That Evo version of the McLaren, actually the first car to be fully developed by McLaren Customer Racing, their GT division, effectively designing these cars. It's, of course, an evolution of that original 720S, and can, in real life, be an upgrade on an existing 720S car. So if you're listening, you happen to own a GT3, there you go. You can upgrade it if it's the McLaren one. As we return our sight back towards this squabble over 8th position, the Aston Martin looking for a way through. It is Liam Neeson on the side, because it's Liam Nissan on the rear spoiler. What an outstanding livery that is. As a lover of a pun, I like that the entire livery of the car is the pun. Particularly enjoying that Liam Neeson is telling his rivals to shush on the very side, at least on the right-hand side of the Liam Nissan. The 420 for the moment, however, continues to hold off Nedorazov, who I think probably has some pace in hand. It seems he loses time in a number of corners as a result of the dirty air, which, if you're a fan of Formula 1, you will know all too much about. Not quite to the same effect here in GT3 competition, but still notable enough, particularly through some of the fast stuff. At the front, it is still Fabian in the 997 Aston Martin from Knudsen. The gap at 2 seconds as it stands, and it's been opening up over the last couple of tours between first and second. Third is Sergei Tamara, fourth is Martin Varga. Then you get down towards this battle that we're looking at on screen. Callum Jones was competing for the podium. Since then, he's got a penalty. He's dropped down the order, finds himself behind Peterson, and actually looking a little bit vulnerable here to Matt Townsend. Townsend closing up all the time in that independent Ford Mustang, but not quite near enough to gamble a little. Look up the inside, a peek, if you will. Still, those driver of the day votes coming in. Sepe getting a vote in that 550 McLaren, which has lost the lead of the semi-pro class to Wazowicz in the Toga Motorsport number 12 Ford Mustang as it got side by side for just a moment for 5th position overall. Once again, the battle costing them a bit of time, and you can see the Bentley scampering off up the road. A Bentley that is quite light here, according to the balance performance. LFM bop, as you would expect from such a high-level competition, and once again, it's proving pretty solid. We've got an Aston from 2 McLarens, from a Ford and a Bentley in the top 5. The only car that seems to be notably struggling with a reasonable sample size, actually, is the 296 Ferrari. Obviously not quite enjoying the nature of this circuit, although I'd expect it to be pretty strong at some of the corners and tracks we go to later on in the calendar. And it's a long calendar here at Toga Motorsport, so make sure you're here for all of it, because we've got a whole bunch of races. Red Bull Ring next week. Then we go to Bathurst, Spa-Francorchamps as we get into April. Then it's Monza, Suzuka rounds out the season. And you won't want to miss a single piece of the action. So make sure you've subscribed, followed, hit all sorts of buttons, as they like to say, as Martin Varga now closes in onto the back of Sergei Tamara. This for a spot on the rostrum. Tamara will defend the inside. Varga to the outside. It should give him a better run out of the corner. At least that's the theory. But Mustang against McLaren. The McLaren, as you'd expect, ever so slightly quicker through the fast-flowing machinery, through the fast-flowing corners, I apologize. That Mustang, the weight distribution slightly further towards the front axle. Not as far as you would think. They've done some clever trickery with it, but definitely edging up towards the front axle. Whereas the BMW, for example, also a front-engine car with a 50-50 weight distribution in that case. And the door is all absolutely glued to the back bumper of the treble 4 Nissan. And in fact, for a moment, according to our time screen, found a way through earlier on in the lap, albeit that has not persisted to where we ride on board now with Nedorazov, who tries to get a better exit out of the final corner, but simply doesn't quite succeed in that quest, and so instead remains tucked in behind. We'll get a dose of slipstream, and I've got absolutely no doubt that Roman will be right back with the Nissan in just a moment or two. Something I've been loving actually here at Toga is not just where we do the streams, of course, but if you're active on the likes of X, particularly I enjoy the Instagram and Twitter and TikTok feeds. There are some great content put up on there. If you're over on TikTok, there's these incident reviews that have been sparking quite a lot of conversation recently on those. Some where the incident genuinely is close, and some where you think if anybody says that's the BMW, they must be blind. So go and check all of that out. Great content on all sorts of platforms here at Toga. For now, we're following this Pro Series race. We are 40 minutes into it. Of a 90-minute race, that means we're getting pretty close to our pit stop window, which will open for 10 minutes around the halfway mark. So 5 minutes before the halfway point, 5 minutes after the halfway point as well. The door is off, however, not quite close enough. I'm just keeping an eye, actually, on Peterson, who seems to be closing in quite a lot towards Martin Varga, who was on the offensive a couple of laps ago, but since then has dropped away once again from Sergei Tamara as the pit window opens, as if on demand. Will anybody come in early? There's two schools of thought here, and if you come in early, in theory you get free track whilst everybody behind is pitting. If you go long, you get free track whilst everybody ahead is pitting. You don't want to come in the rush in the middle, because at no stage do you get that free air. It does get a little bit more complicated here at Paul Ricard, of course, because not only have we got some twisty stuff, we've also got that big long straight where the slipstream is worth a good amount. This is Vladimir Beluga. He's one of the early stoppers, deciding to get the pit visit in and out of the way. Roman Nedorazov taking a similar theory to this race. Vladimir Beluga was actually also leading your way for driver of the day, however, since has been passed by Pirat. Pirat himself down in 31st position as it stands right now, with a pretty slow lap last time around, so some sort of chaos going on with Perat, but still a fan favourite, carrying over, of course, from the Rookie Championship. Perat, one of our graduates, so to speak, here in the Pro class. Matt Townsend is who you're looking at in this wonderful aqua and purple Ford Mustang, closing in on Callum Jones. Callum Jones, who, let's not forget, will fall behind this group come the pit stop window. He is currently 11 seconds off the leader, so he's going to lose at least 2 spots, I would say, when he comes into the pits. He may be about to lose one of them on circuit, however, as up the inside slots Matt Townsend. Bit of a bump on the exit. The stewards will be informed of that. Anytime there's contact, they get a notification. But I suspect that one was simply door-to-door racing incident. No harm, no foul. And Matt Townsend now into 6th position, can set his sights towards the top 5 and that fantastic Bentley Continental. Here's Josh Wood. Josh Wood in that 22 Toga Academy car. The Academy, for reference, involves drivers coming along to get involved and improve, often with an eye to getting involved with the Toga Esports squad. And this is a perfect representation of just how quick the Academy guys can get on, because Josh Wood has been a part of that Academy for a little while, has been getting the tutoring, finding a bit more lap time, finding a bit more confidence as well, given that this is a 90-minute race. Now you find the 22 Academy car up behind the number 55 Toga Esports car. Josh Wood giving him a good run for his money. And can Wood find a way through on Schmidt? Neither of them pitting this time around. I would have thought there was an undercut available there possibly for Josh Wood, but he opts against it. Slow car, I suspect, having just exited the pits, as Martin Varga himself is stationary in the pits. Your leader yet to stop, however, as is 2nd and 3rd. So Martin Varga's the highest positioned car to have entered pit road so far. There are, of course, almost 7 minutes in which they can make their stop. Callum Jones closing once more. He's looking to retaliate against Matt Townsend, who got him at this very corner. The double right, named after one of the nearby towns, where if you look ahead, Callum Jones obviously brakes for the corner, you would probably be able to see the town in the distance, because it's not far away at all. But Callum not able to match Matt there. Matt has been given a 5-second penalty. That'll be for minor contact. So now suddenly Callum Jones's eyes will light up, because he's not too far away from that Mustang, and if he can stay there, he may well be able to catch him in the second part of this race. I do also wonder if the Mustangs are chewing through their tyres a little bit, particularly the rear left. And right on cue, Callum Jones hits the brakes. Tricky pit entry here at Paul Ricard, and he is in for his stop. So too is the car we're looking at, Jakob Knudsen. He's right in towards the end of pit lane, isn't he, Jakob? So he'll get a good run out at the very least. There was a great battle here in the rookies not so long ago. On Wednesday, that would have been for the lead just after the pit stop. Fabian will be hoping that's not the case this time. There is a huge snap of oversteer for Gabriel Schmidt. Is he coming into the pits? Yep, that's enough from those tyres. They've said enough, and then they've slapped him in the face to make sure he knew about it as he hits the brakes and gets it slowed down. Early box there for Schmidt. So he'll have had all his pit information, how much fuel he wants, what tyre pressures he wants, set up well in advance, so that Paul Ricard with a long back straight, there is ample opportunity to sort such things out. So, halfway through the race, 45 minutes gone, 45 minutes left to go. Pit window is currently open. And of course, halfway through the race means we're halfway through that as well. We'll give you a rundown of the full order after the pits have filtered themselves through each and every one of our cars. Remember this mandatory pit stop. You must take some amount of fuel, although it's not defined how much, and you must take tires. If you don't do either of those, your stop will not count as the mandatory. And indeed, your mandatory stop, of course, has to be within the window. So that's all things that the drivers will have had in mind. Mandatory fuel taking is quite important as well, because right now we're riding on board with Matt Pryor, who is close to the back of Donkervolker. Both of these guys having completed their pit stop. Donkervolker in a 296 Ferrari, that car can be very, very efficient on both fuel and tires. So if there wasn't a mandation to take both tyres and fuel, there's a chance that our 296 Ferraris would be looking pretty good in terms of strategy. Race leader into the pits. Fabienne gets the BFR racing car slowed down to a stop in the box, and so all eyes turn to Sergei Tamara, who's still out on circuit. So too is Peterson in the Bentley, as they, of course, rise to the top of the order, partially because they are the cream, but also partially because some of the rest of the cream has been put into the pit road's gob, as Knudsen gets it slowed down into the left-hander and accelerates back out the other side once more. So then, pit window continuing to filter through. This is Jakob Knudsen, and it's all about trying to get the car into a lovely window for the end of this race now. It's important to keep an eye on how the pit stops play out, of course, but if you stop early, you do a couple more laps on the tyres. Good play there from the back marker. Fabian has come back out the pits, and he runs now up towards the top end of the circuit. He's through 1 and 2. This is turn 3. In the background, you see Jakob Knudsen. And so there's no worries there in terms of positions being gained or lost. Gap around about 3.5 to 4 seconds between those two at this stage. Good to see some votes for driver of the day still coming in. Josh Wood joins the fray, courtesy of that vote from Pokek, who was, I believe, racing in the Rookie Series, if memory serves correctly. Certainly involved in the stream chat to some degree, as on the brakes is the treble 4 of Nedorazov. If you're following that Rookie Series, you may be used to the treble 4 actually being a V12 Vantage, courtesy of Pokamandi. Here it's just a V8 Vantage, but still pretty exciting, as into the stop comes not only one of the most recognizable cars in the form of a Bentley Continental GT3, but one of the most recognizable liveries as well. That car pitting from second position leaves us with just Sergei Tamara out on circuit, and I presume he's going to make it round for a stop. I think he's just about going to get there in time. However, he's not going to have a whole lot in hand if he were to make some sort of catastrophic error. Well, in truth, if he was to make a catastrophic error, he would have other things on his mind. So here is Sergei Tamara. Last car not to enter the pits. We said this was a valid strategy, taking advantage of the open track. He's got 1 minute and 15 to get back round to the pit entry. He's currently, as we count it down, he's got 4, 3, 2, and 1. He's now 1 minute into the lap. So that would put him on a little over a 2-minute lap. So he should make it in with relative comfort. If there's a mistake at the end of the straight here, it falls into question as to whether or not it's the correct decision, but he's in cam and he's in control. And so as a result, I suspect he'll be A-okay, and he'll be pretty grateful for his strategy, I reckon, here, actually, because he's running over 1 minute up on Fabian, which will mean he'll come out probably just behind the 997 Aston Martin. He should be right on top of Jakob Knudsen, though, as they exit the pits. So keep an eye on these guys as we get towards what technically is the beginning of the very next lap. Pit window down to under 30 seconds. Here is Sergei Tamara from Sim Haven Racing. Hits the brakes on the all-blue McLaren, gets himself over to the pit lane entry, just about made it the right side of the line there, which is something they're told about in the briefing, and he hits the brakes. Into the stop he goes. One of the Toga Mustangs accelerates down the line, and he's got to ace this stop here now. Make sure you get stopped on the marks. Make sure you've got the engine running as soon as possible, and then accelerate back out the other side. Here is Nedorazov, having yet another good look at the view of the back of a Nissan. He'll be able to recreate that livery from memory if he wants to after this race, as he's not really closing in the slipstream. I reckon there's a combination of the Nissan being pretty powerful. I was about to say slippery. It's not slippery in the slightest, but it's pretty powerful. And I reckon Nedorazov is running quite a lot of downforce, because those Astons can be set up in 2 different ways for this circuit. One is a bit more comfortable. One, on the other hand, gives you that extra straight line speed down the straight. Here is Fabian. He comes down the pit lane exit. Tamara still registered as in the pit. So flash of the lights from Fabian as he gives the car ahead a bit of a notification. And indeed, we saw just off the side there the McLaren number 701 will come out in third position. It's going to be pretty tight, actually, with Martin Varga when it all sorts itself out. There's Varga in the background, a shot. And so the Simhaven machine is back into the fray, running third, actually quite a way off the back of Jakob Knudsen when this one all plays out, I think. So assuming the timing screen is not telling lies here, Knudsen may well have aced the strategy. Was he running heavy at the start? Did he just nail the stop? Well, that's all to be determined, but at least for now, Tamara's dropped down the order just a little bit. Tamara, 1 minute and 5 in the pits. Knudsen, 1 minute and 5 in this pit, so it's all identical. Varga, a loser, as was Pettersson. They both had to spend a few extra seconds in the stop since they've all completed now. It's a longer stop as well for Matt Townsend, so the greedy cars inevitably requiring a bit more fuel. Callum Jones, of course, we know that he was going to be in longer. He had a penalty to serve. And in turn, the statistics down the order are a bit like that, where we can't pay too much attention to them in truth. Here is Josh Wood, however. He's on the outside of Kasperkovic. And he's found a way through on Kasperkovic. No answer from the Lamborghini. I believe that's one of the Barwell liveries from British GT. Barwell cars used to being near the front, and indeed Kasperkovic has given it a decent run out here in the Toga Pro Series Season 1, Round 1. To the inside looks the 44 Aston Martin. That made me a bit uncomfortable. I'm sure the 44 car breathed in as he's getting a bit fed up now, I think, of sitting behind the Liam Nissan. But that Nissan has a very particular set of skills, and they're all to do with defense, as far as I can tell, because still Nadorazov cannot find a way through on Limburgs. This is absolutely fantastic from Limburgs. I mean, again, he's just ever so slightly in the middle of the road. All of this is allowing Callum Jones to catch them up, and I suspect Callum will make relatively light work of these two, because he was running on top 5 pace. He got a penalty, which has dropped him backwards in the pit stop window. But now he's going to be carving through at least this area of the field like a hot knife through butter. Remember, let's keep those Driver of the Day votes coming in. If you're on YouTube or Twitch, exclamation mark vote, space, and then the number. If you can view previous bits of the chat, you'll probably be able to tell how it's done, because there's been a good number of votes coming through. And if you want to vote again, remember, you get a vote on YouTube and you get a vote on Twitch, so you could give your favorite driver just a bit of a leg up. Limburgs is driving it hard through that end of the circuit, isn't he? Pushing as hard as he dare on the front left and indeed the rear left through 6. And here comes the Mustang of Callum Jones. We thought he might make light work of this. The Aston Martin running a lot of downforce in the slipstream still has no answer for that Mustang of Callum Jones, but he now might get that final dose of tow he's been looking for a few laps to try and get this move completed. There's a back marker just ahead of them as well. Through goes Callum Jones on the pair of them. It's going to be side by side behind the Aston Martins on the outside. There is the opportunity to switch back through this one, but he's not close enough. Callum Jones is at Limburgs, and Nadorazov is up into 7th position. Nadorazov, meanwhile, still stranded behind the Liam Nissan. With the pit stops having played out, it gives us a chance to run you through the order. That on screen for reference is the battle for third in semi-pro. Up ahead, the leader is still Sepe in the 550 McLaren. Then it's Wazowicz in the number 12 Ford Mustang. This for third position. Gabriel Schmidt leading Haran in the number 101 Mustang. So it's Schmidt who's currently situated on the final podium spot. It's just a little bit beyond track limits, runs Taran. You'll have to be careful with things like that, particularly at some of the other corners where you almost get an automatic penalty for doing it. There, if you lose the time, you can just about get away without a track limits warning. As straying possibly beyond track limits himself goes Gabriel Schmidt, showing just how hard these two are pressuring each other. Remember this for the final spot on the podium. 3rd and 4th positions. Taran 4th, 3rd is Gabriel Schmidt. 5th to complete your top 5 in the semi-pro class is Matt Pryor. Another Ford Mustang. Obviously, the semi-pro's enjoying that one. He's a number of seconds further back behind these two, actually, but having a pretty solid race. He'll have to keep an eye out for Bruno Pateron towards the closing stages. In the pros, well, that's the overall order at the moment. It's Fabian in the 997 Aston Martin, who's lapping really quickly out front in the 53s pretty consistently. Jakob Nunsen is sitting in second place, and the first of the McLarens ahead of the second of the McLaren, Sergei Tamara, in third. Fourth is Martin Varga, a car that I would anticipate trying to get himself back up towards the podium fight in due course. And rounding out your top 5 in the pro order is Peterson in the number 77 Bentley Continental. Christoph, we ride on. Look at him right now. We don't ride on board. We don't ride on board. That's a straight up lie. But we do look at him and we get a good view, not just of himself, but also of Martin Varga. Surely there's not a Bentley Continental charged towards the podium here. It's like 2018 all over again as the big Bentley crawls all over the rear of a pretty large Ford Mustang, hitting the brakes once again. That Ford, it's got one of the highest capacity engines in the field, 5.4 litres flowing through the block, and it's a naturally aspirated V8 in terms of the cylinders. There is Taran, and he's ahead of Gabriel Schmidt, so third position has swapped hands in the semi-pro class, although he's immediately throwing all kinds of shapes, is Kairilo Taran. And then we've got Bruno Battiglin, who we said was ever so slightly further down the order and could be thinking about a top 5. He is now thinking about a top 5, and he's got a top 5 because Battiglin in the gold BMW moves up ahead of Matt Pryor, who presumably has pretty livery. But unfortunately, we are not able to see that one. So hopefully, if you're listening, get that one uploaded and we'll have it on stream next week. Here comes Peterson for 4th position in the pro class. 77 Bentley Continental closing all the time. That is turn number 8. Here is turn number 9, referred to as the double right, but officially just one corner, but one corner that is called Double Doigt de Bousset. The last bit being a town just beyond the edges of the circuit, as the Bentley Continental couldn't find a way through. We're now into turn number 10 and into Garbalan Curve, as we mentioned earlier on, named after a mountain that you probably might see in the distance if you look just in the right way on a clear day, but it's closer to Marseille than it is this Paul Ricard race circuit that's been around for quite a while, of course. 2 different stints on the Formula 1 calendar, a cutting-edge venue on both occasions, and indeed commonly used for testing due to just how many variations of the circuit we have. We're using the traditional GT3 layout at the moment, however, which involves, first of all, this Glassworks S as you go to the left and back to the right once more. Here is the battle for the lead that has come right together, and a lunge on the brakes. Vazovic in semi-pro, let us not forget, now at the head of the field, but his exit is going to be compromised. That was a bold, brave, and rather brisk battle between Vazovic and Sepe. Sepe, one of the drivers to have been voted for, and our driver of the day, Paul, which you can do with exclamation mark vote. He may yet get himself a couple more votes too, because up the inside he comes on a narrow line, but he's got it stopped, and he's got it stopped right in front of Konrad Vazovic. So Vazovic will have to try again, possibly down the back straight, although he's not patient enough to wait for it as he shows a nose to the inside of turn number 3. That was always going to close down on him. And then through the right, there's a touch of the brake, another touch as he's fighting the nose of that Mustang, trying to get the weight into the apex of the corner. Once it's there, you can get on the power and use every single one of the, well, I suppose they're not ponies, they're Mustangs for this Ford, as he's now foot to the floor up the Mistral straight. They're my favourite chocolates, and he's closing. He's going to get a dose of slipstream from the McLaren as well, which for a moment appeared to indicate to the left. I wonder if he's going to let this one go, or he was just telling Wazovic where he wants him, because Sepe in the McLaren will not have the top end of that Mustang, but he's got track position. He's on the inside. He'll be favoured. He'll brake very late. They squeeze towards the inside. A bit of a touch there. That to me looked like 2 into 1, but the stewards will take a look. Vazovic rejoins, having not lost a whole bunch of time. Here we go again then. There is plenty of space for both cars. The McLaren behind it first, but gets alongside and is, well, on the apex curb. Could not have been any further to the right. And then in turn, the door just shuts ever so slightly on top of him. as Konrad Vazovic pulled himself down to an apex in turn. I reckon that's a racing incident, but it's certainly on the marginal end of it, so we'll see what the stewards have to say and whether any penalties pop up in due course. Pettersson, Chase the Rabbit, is chasing a horse instead because Martin Varga is still ever so slightly up the road. That was going to get tight as the Bentley thought about an optimistic one. It is there if you set it up on purpose, but to try and lunge without having set it up was always going to be brave. These two actually catching one of the Ferraris from ever so slightly further down the order. And so it's possible that that back marker could be a factor. Pettersson will have that in the back of his mind, but he would rather be ahead now than later because all the time he's behind Varga, they are actually losing time to the cars ahead. Varga not having had the pace in stint number 2 that he had in stint number 1. Up towards the top end of the circuit we go then. Pettersson not close enough. That Bentley, well, it's quite light here with a balance of performance, but obviously running quite a bit of aero. The T-tray behind it will help, however, as we get in towards the double right-hander. Closing still. He looks good on the power there, does Pettersson. Is there an opportunity to put a lunge in towards turn number 10? No, not quite. He's able to swoop on a wider line, however, but can't throw it back for the apex. Gets a similar exit to the Ford up ahead. Bentley running the curb, Ford avoiding that. Some drivers will say there's a difference in tyre wear effect, although others will say that they're talking absolute nonsense. So take from that what you will as we come onto the pit straight once more. And still Martin Varga is ahead of Christoph Pettersson. Martin Varga having lost a little bit of time relative to the leaders, but actually finding some time relative to Sergei Tamara, who may have dealt with some traffic on that last lap, because it certainly wasn't his best, despite Sector 2 being green on our timing screen. Here is Sepe, who, let's not forget, until recently was the leader in semi-pro. 550 now second place in semi-pro, but you see that big green thing just ahead? Yeah, that's the leader in semi-pro, so Sepe's not dropped far away. And the Belgian is trying to make scenes in France as they approach turn number 1. Hard on the brakes. The McLaren super comfortable over those curbs on entry, you can see. And now through turn 2, again, using quite a bit of the apex curve. Differing driving styles. Some cars and drivers, in fact, more than anything, will prefer to totally avoid this apex curve of turn number 2, thinking that because it's so off camera, it just pushes you wide. The only way to take it is to be really aggressive and mount it. And that's exactly what Sepe was doing, as we saw the beginning of the lap. In the second part of the lap, he's going to get a good dose of slipstream. So too will Matt Pryor get a good dose of slipstream, because on the time screen it says he's ahead of Bruno Battiglin. I can tell you that's about to swap, because it's Bruno Battiglin who is in 16th. Matt Pryor would love to have it back, however, as the Mustang slipstreams the BMW M4, and it's pretty close through turn number 1 and 2. Better exit, better traction, better line, in fact, full stop, from Matt Pryor in the Mustang. He set it up a treat through 1 and 2. Can he complete it into 3? He can at the first part, and at 4, he's got it stopped right on top of the apex. Downside for Matt Pryor, he's now going to be the one giving the slipstream instead of having it. So tactically, it may not have been the best play, but in terms of entertainment, we are absolutely loving it. Behind them, Pateron has a penalty. Rhys Aindo has picked up a drive-through. That likely to be for track limits, I would have thought. And of course, a couple of penalties coming through. The only instance of speeding in the pits that we had came through earlier on. It was Josh Wood who picked up that one, but has since served his stop-go 30 seconds. This is Rhys Aindo. He himself is battling with Josh Wood, a battle that I'm sure they're having lots of fun in. These two will know each other well, but the Toga Racing Gulf liveried Aston Martin, as we say, has that drive-through, and so is effectively trying to gain as much race time as possible. You would have thought, over Rhys with a jink from one side of the road to the other, make sure that Josh Wood isn't too close to him at all. Here they come. Top of the circuit. Wood not able to challenge, probably as a suspect of that jinking back and forth. And it's interesting to see that these two, they're not losing touch with the car just up the road from them that you're seeing in the foreground of our shot here from time to time. That car is the third place Sergei Tamara machine, which would imply that not too far back, there we go, you got a pair of green Mustangs, because that'll be Martin Barga, the Bentley of Peterson, and actually Matt Townsend not so far away either. So these guys are about to have an awful lot of fun. Sadok slightly further back behind the pair of them, running in, what's that, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th in the semi-pro class. The Lamborghini having a look up the inside is just inside the top 10, and indeed 11th is Murrell in the Ferrari number 612. Murrell himself with a decent stint number 2 here, I reckon. So he's showing reasonable pace as one of the cars exits the pits at just the wrong time for Murrell. And of course we can keep an eye on the Ford Mustang you saw coming through. That is of course one of the leaders, and so we'll be hoping to get through this lot without too much time lost. Still at the front, we're not seeing him in a while, it is Fabian in the number 97 as the Bentley again takes that tight line at turn number 5. It's obviously just the quickest way of getting the big brute through the twisty part, is just to shorten the line. However, it does make me a touch nervous each time through. Returning to our order for just a moment, it is Fabian who leads the way. He has the fastest lap as well, which is worth a further 2 bonus points in each class. And the 997 at the moment has 5 seconds worth of advantage, or so. It's ebbing and flowing between 5 and 4 between himself and Jakob Nunsen. Third place is Sergei Tamara. Fourth is what you've got on screen right now, Martin Varga and Christoph Peterson. Closer to each other than Martin Varga would want. Not quite as close as Christoph Peterson would like, as he's driving that Bentley, seeking, searching, hoping for a way through. Josh Wood gets well and truly out the way of these two. Thinks, no thank you, I don't fancy any of that, as he sees the battle inside the overall top 5 loom upon him, and it's 2 massive front grills that meet those mirrors. Thank you for the vote on Hunter Davis, voting for Martin Varga for driver of the day. Got to say, he's putting in a reasonable shout for it. I'm still very impressed by the drive that Fabian put in. Of course, he's leading the race, so maybe it's not in the spirit of driver of the day, but despite having started on the front row, he had a shocker of a start, and we saw him at the back of the lead group in those opening laps, clawed his way through, and is now showing consistency out front. Martin Varga, on the other hand, has been involved in a battle pretty much every step of the way. It's generally been for around about 3rd, 4th, 5th position. At the moment, he's trying to hold on to 4th, just as he has been for the last few laps in a row, in fact, as Peterson looks strong here through turns 2, 3, 4, and 5. The problem is that if you make an overtake here, you just end up behind onto the back straight, onto the Mistral straight, if you will, and the Bentley, for whatever reason, doesn't quite have the legs to go with that Ford Mustang. We touched on the fact that the Mustang has plenty of power, plenty of torque too, over 550 Newton meters if you were to deregulate it and just let it run at full chat. In race trim, it's probably a little bit less than that, but you'll need every single pound-foot of torque on this back straight, because the Bentley is coming once again, tucks out of the slipstream. I wonder if he might tuck back in again in a moment, because as soon as he pulls outside of that toe, he's got absolutely nothing to offer Martin Varga. Indeed, Varga returns to the racing line and is able to take said racing line through turn 8. Now into turn 9. I reckon this could be an opportunity for the move if he's able to gain an overlap ever so slightly earlier in the corner than was going to present itself on this particular occasion. And so he's still got to keep studying that rear wing. You'd think surely Martin Varga will make a mistake eventually. Well, he doesn't do it very often, in truth. You think back to the final season of, or the final race of his rookie season victory. It was him who stayed consistent when the likes of Kaya were finding themselves in the grass and in the barriers at Brands Hatch. Here we are on a circuit that could not be more different to Brands Hatch, and still proving to be rather impregnable in his defense. In towards turn number 1 once more. Time has continued to tick away during this enthralling second stint of the race. We, of course, started it with around about 40 minutes on the clock as the pit window closed. We are now down to just 20 minutes to go. So your classic open lobby sprint, if you will, except for the fact that all these drivers are on very, very worn tyres. We turn our attention for a moment back to Taran and Gabriel Schmidt. Now, if memory serves correctly, the last time we saw these guys, Pateron was ahead of Gabriel Schmidt, at least for a fleeting moment. Now it's swapped back the other way. Gabriel Schmidt third in the semi-pro classification, fourth for Taran, and so there's more than just points on offer here. There's a podium on offer here if during the next 20 minutes, or 18 minutes and 55 seconds to be precise, he can get himself ahead of his fellow Mustang driver. 55 versus 101. Hopefully he's not got any Dalmatians in there, although I'm sure he is thinking cats and dogs are in his stomach with the nerves that he'll be feeling getting himself into turn one for yet another lap behind Gabriel Schmidt, having been trying to make this pass for the last 20 minutes at least. The other factor that could come into play here is you'll spot just behind. These two are battling very, very hard. Well, you've got Donkervolker in the 51 Ferrari. That is a pro-class car, but it is inherently a Toga Esports car. And so for Gabriel Schmidt, it's a teammate. For Taran, it's an enemy. It's somebody who could get in between himself and the class leader he's currently trying to, or at least the podium positioning class he's currently trying to get a hold of. Penalty for Sepe in the 550 McLaren. That's second place in semi-pro, 10 seconds going the way of the 550. Would currently not result in a position drop, but you feel that if these two Mustangs running third and fourth get a rig along, they could possibly be looking at second and third by the end of the race. Fantastic work on that penalty ticker as well, keeping you up to date with everything you need to know all the way through this one. Disappointingly, Nadorazov has picked up a penalty, and so despite having finally found a way through on the Liam Nissan of Limburgs, he is actually behind the Nissan on corrected times. As we look at Christoph Peterson, who is within 0.4 of a second, he's within 0.3 of a second of the Mustang, he's within 0.2 of a second of the Toga bright green Mustang. You cannot miss it. And yet somehow the Bentley stalls once more on the Mistral straight. The frontal area rather large on the Bentley. In fact, it's even larger than the production car as he looks to the inside at the double right-hander. Can't quite get an overlap and drifts a little wider than he would have wanted. Pulls it down for that late apex, bouncing over the curb, however, and you saw for a moment, just got a hint of oversteer. No more than a hint, but it was enough to break traction and prevent a run in towards turn number 10. Back to that Bentley for a moment. It is actually much bigger than the road-going equivalent. In fact, the only piece carried across on the same scale as the road car are the headlights, and they're actually outset ever so slightly more than usual to make them seem like they're bigger than they are as we ride on board or look at Sadok, who is in that wonderful and very, very recognisable green Porsche. Problem is, it's a green Porsche that is dropping positions because Merle has found a way through on him in that battle, and I believe so too has Mitchell Sterenberg in the number 27 Nissan. So a Porsche that was 20th now runs 22nd as we return back to your battle for the final spot on the semi-pro podium. This is Taran and Schmidt. Schmidt on the inside, Taran on the outside. Cannot carry the momentum, and he could well be vulnerable here, because here comes Dokkervelka. Dokkervelka is in the pro class, but he is, of course, teammate of Gabriel Schmidt, and so the Ferrari gets ahead of the first Mustang and is allowed through, possibly, the second Mustang. Although, actually, I'll tell you what, Gabriel Schmidt's going to hold his line here. No team games in play between the two Toga Esports cars. You'd have thought there was a number of ways they could have played this to advantage them both relative to Taran, but instead, they're going to go side by side through Tower Turn and up towards the final corner. Surely the Ferrari's not going to stick it in deep on the brakes. He's going to give it a go, and he's given a lot of room as well. This is all allowed Taran to stay right with them as the two Toga cars neck and neck, side by side. Mustang with the legs on the straight will pull ahead at least for now, and so your third place car in semi-pro leads one of the lower cars in the professional class, but for a fleeting moment, because back up the inside comes Donkervelka in that fantastic Ferrari 296. The light flash from Gabriel Schmidt. I tell you what, you've got to empathise with him because he's fighting for a class podium and his teammate is somewhat disturbing the rhythm here. Remember, we got action from this championship all the way through the next month and a half. It's every single week, 7 p.m. in the UK. Adapt that to your appropriate time zones because it's going to be like this each and every time we hit the circuit, with tracks such as Red Bull Ring, Spa, Bathurst and Suzuka yet to come in the calendar. This is slightly further down the order, our Ferrari 488, slightly older edition of the Ferrari GT3 cars, but a successful one nonetheless. He's defending the inside against Budko, and David Roth has done a pretty good job at that, actually, in fending off the much newer BMW M4. Although not the newest BMW M4, because of course a brand new spec of BMW, the Evo, has entered the world of real-life GT racing this year, albeit actually some of the teams choosing to run the older spec, particularly at Bathurst, notably. All the BMWs were the non-Evo edition of that car, as our BMW number 2 gets just a hint sideways in his attempt to get back at David Roth, and so Roth will survive for at least another corner or two. For reference, we've not spoken about the leader in quite a while. Fabian in the 997, Aston Martin leading the way by 8 seconds at points, 7.4 at the last split, but it does ebb and flow depending on exactly which sector and so on and so forth, but certainly there or thereabouts. Behind him is Jakob Knudsen, then Sergei Tamara. Then you get this battle, which never seems to end in truth. You've got Martin Varga, the car we're looking at slightly more directly, that bright green toga Ford Mustang. For lap after lap after lap, he's been fending off the charge, and it has been a hard charge from that number 77 Bentley. A couple of lunges into turn number 5 that we caught on camera. I suspect, given how long they've been at it, there's been a couple of attempts at the overtake that have been off camera as well, and yet Martin Varga holds valiant for now. The Hungarian looking pretty solid up the straights. It's through the twisty stuff where it seems that the Bentley has the upper hand, and so you've got to ask the question that where would the Bentley like to make the move? Well, myself recently, driving here in a McLaren, which has similar straight line speed struggles, it was a case of staying close down the back straight, knowing you weren't ever going to make the move at turn 8, the fast right coming into that back straight, but setting it up into turn 9, where you could just drift alongside if you got the line right, and in doing so, you had almost all of Sector 3 to try and put a gap into the car you'd just overtaken. Something like that is what's going to be on the mind of Christoph Peterson, who we ride on board with. This is going to be a great view to see how much, if any, of effect that slipstream is having. And he is just beginning to tow up towards the back of this Ford Mustang. Maybe this time the opportunity is presenting. This for 4th position overall and in the pro class. As he gets closer, closer, closer still, he goes to the outside once again. And as soon as he's out of that slipstream, buffering. Straight away, that Bentley was losing ground to the Mustang. He is, however, closer than he's ever been through the fast right, but I still don't think it's close enough. He's able to carry the momentum in, but that compromises him in the mid-corner, which is where he needs to get the overlap. The only solution to this is to be braver on the brakes into the fast right at the end of the Mistral Straight. By doing that, he'll have less ground to make up in the subsequent double right of turn number 9. There is, of course, also the theory that he could make a pass somewhere like turn 3. And whilst you never want to encourage anything overly aggressive, a block pass would probably slow that Mustang down quite a bit. So if you could put a hard block pass in, of course, without the contact, and touch wood on that one, then in theory, Christoph Peterson could make the pass somewhere in Sector 1 as well. But you have to say that early in Sector 3 is his best opportunity at the very least. Still, they carry on round the laps then. It's getting pretty close down for 11th position. Indeed, Wazowicz has been passed by Oreshkin. That not a pass for positioning class, that's purely for track position on the road, but it does mean that Wazowicz is no longer challenging Sepe on circuit, albeit Sepe has a penalty of 10 seconds. So exactly how that plays out is going to be one to keep an eye on, because at the moment he would hold the class lead by 1.8 seconds But any sort of mistakes, and you get the feeling that slightly rugged-looking Ford Mustang could well be right back with him. There's definitely bonnet damage to the front of Wazowicz. I wonder when that's happened, because he didn't have it when he was fighting for the class lead, and surely that's costing him time on the straights, you would have thought, because whilst the Mustang may not be the most aerodynamically friendly shape in the first place, it does help when you don't open up a pocket to trap air in underneath the bonnet. Indeed, Wazowicz last time around did a 159, which is really slow by his standards. Bruno Battiglin in a battle once again at the moment. He finds himself with Matt Pryor. He was coming into the corner ahead of Matt. Surely this isn't going to be the lunge. Oh, it is absolutely beautiful from the Mustang. Then the door closes on him from the BMW. Now, the stewards will have a look at that. I personally, big fan of the British Touring Car Championship, would say that's okay, although I know not everybody would be inclined to agree with me on that one. So we'll see what the stewards have to say. For now, Pryor, having put in what I'm going to say is a lovely lunge, a luxurious lunge, if you will, leads Battiglin, albeit Battiglin will be pretty aggrieved, you would have thought, it being done by such an aggressive move, even if it is deemed a fair move. And so the Pigeon racing car is closing all the way up once again. I love the little coloured flare on the side of that all gold livery, as the pair of front-engined beasts bring themselves onto the Mistral straight. In the distance, you may just be able to make out an Aston Martin in the side of shot from time to time. That's your race leader, who has 9 seconds worth of advantage. 0 seconds worth of advantage for Battiglin nor Matt Pryor, as they are side by side, but it's Matt Pryor who will have the position and the track position associated with it as they go through the fast right-hander. Is there an opportunity for Bruno to find a way back through? Oh no, we don't talk about that, Bruno. He's gone well deep at the double right. That will cost him a bit of time, to say the least, although I got no doubt that he'll be annoyed enough to try and make it up straight away. This for the final spot in the top 5 of the semi-pro class, for reference. So there's good points on offer here. We touched on the fact earlier on that inside the top 3, Gabriel Schmidt could do with a helping hand from Don Kavolka. Well, he's getting just that now. The German finds himself 3rd in class. He's got a car from the pro class, and notably his teammate, between himself and the Ukrainian driving the 101 Ford. Pateron 0.6 of a second back from the Ferrari, a further 0.4 of a second back from the Ford Mustang, although that Mustang could be uncharacteristically vulnerable down this back straight, because he's made a bit of a mess there of the top end of the section. Instead of it being flowing like a water slide, it was tangled like spaghetti for him through turns 3, 4, 5, and 6. But there's so many ponies under the hood of that Mustang, and instead it's going to be Pateron who's able to challenge the Ferrari 296, despite that Ferrari having a healthy dose of slipstream. It may have to be robust up the top of this straight, because having pulled out of the toe, he's not got a huge amount of straight line speed in hand, but it is a position gained for Pateron, who is now back ahead of the pro class car, back into 14th overall, and can set his sights on Gabriel Schmidt for the semi-pro podium for not the first time, not the second time either. This is going to be at least his 3rd go at this in this 90-minute race, which is now down to just 5 minutes remaining. On board then with Gabriel Schmidt. What a sound from that Ford Mustang. The rumbling V8, all about getting on the power, getting the steering open as they get very close in the mid-keen corner, concertinaing up, and now looking over the rear wing of the Toga racing car. You had a great view there of the battle behind. This is Don Kavelka trying to do his teammate a favor, trying to find a way through on the Ford Mustang of Pateron, but cannot quite get there. And so 3rd and 4th in the semi-pro class, our 2 Fords on screen, stay pretty close together. For reference, up the front of the order, it's now 10 seconds between your leader, Fabian Huilot, and Jakob Nunsen. Nunsen then almost 10 seconds ahead of Sergei Tamara, who's got just the 1.6 seconds over Martin Varga, who seems to have somewhat of a second wind in this one. Last time around, that gap came down by 0.3 of a second, because it was not a particularly quick lap from Sergei Tamara. In turn, Peterson still pretty competitive with Martin Varga, albeit the gap's opened up in recent laps, but don't count the Bentley out of a last-ditch dash for the podium. Martin Varga, well, he's currently leading our driver of the day poll by quite some margin. If you've not yet cast your vote, remember it's !vote space, and then the car number that you want to vote for. As Matt Pryor finds a BMW, while Bruno Battaglin up his inside once again. They're both going to get a dose of slipstream here, because that move has happened as a result of them being lapped. The yellow McLaren is not in their class, it's not in their lap, it's the second place car, in fact. And Matt Pryor, he's got a drive-through penalty. That is going to put a virtual end to this battle with Bruno, albeit he's going to be right up the inside as they get towards the top end of the Mistral Straight. Not able to get it done there, and to be honest, he ought to take this drive-through as quickly as possible, because he's costing himself time in this battle, and in doing so, costing himself effective positions. Battaglin doing a good job here, actually, of sticking right with Jakob. I anticipate that Jakob is easing off the pace just a little bit. His best lap's a 153.7. Last time round, he was on a low 155. So cruising it in, having 10 seconds worth of margin ahead of him, and indeed 10 seconds worth of margin behind him. It's the battle for third place that is going to get very interesting in this overall order, just as the battle for third place continues to be interesting in the semi-pro class. Bouncing over the curbs, bobbling through the left-hander. Turan is going to be really, really tight to the back of Gabriel Schmidt here. Gabriel Schmidt, who may well get just a little bit held up by the 488 of David Roth. That car will be better on the straight than a 296, but through the corners, as we touched on earlier, it does struggle just a bit. Here's Martin Varga, fourth place overall, being significantly quicker than Sergei Tamara of Simhaven Racing in recent laps. And indeed, even in the first sector alone, that gap has come down from around about 0.9 of a second to around about 0.4 of a second. So the Mustang, one of the fastest cars on the straight, may yet have a go at the McLaren, one of the slowest cars on the straight. He's going to have this lap and one more to get the job done here, so it's by no means going to be easy since we're on the penultimate lap. And so he's only got, well, one chance to make a mistake when making the overtake, and even if he does make a mistake, Christoph Peterson, that Bentley, could well be right with them. So too could Matt Townsend. We've got 4 cars coming together for third position. It's going to be to the outside for Martin Varga. That's a brave move in the Mustang, but he knows exactly what he wants to do. He wants to get a good run out of the corner. Over the curbs goes Sergei Tamara. So far, he's held him off. Martin Varga closing, and then falling back, as you would expect the front-engine car to do on the entry to Sector 3. This all allowing the likes of Peterson, who's now within half a second of Martin Varga, the likes of Matt Townsend to come into play as we get towards the last lap of the race. Here we go then, the leader's already onto that last lap. That one seemingly done. Fabian Guillot with a huge amount of advantage. Jakob Knudsen comfortable in second. Third position is what you're looking at. The McLaren. Sergei Tamara has been in the top 3 all the way through this race. Led it at one stage. Let us not forget. Martin Varga, on the other hand, has been scrapping, clawing for positions, gaining himself back up that order throughout the last 90 minutes. And it's all led to this, nose to tail into turn number 3. Varga looks at the inside, then thinks about the outside. The slightly defensive line from Tamara will compromise him, and surely that McLaren is going to have problems down the back straight, because behind him, he's got Mustang, Bentley, Mustang. Any one of these 4 could possibly be on the podium come the end of this next half lap or so. Onto the Mistral Street we go. Straight over to the left-hand side goes Sergei Tamara. The sim racing car trying to break the toe, weaves back over to the right. He's going to have a question here of where does he defend? Does he position the car for the inside of Sine Curve? Does he position his car to the outside of that turn number 8? The Mustang closing still. It'll have to be the outside line for Martin Varga, the former Rookies champion. gets the nose in towards the inside, gets the nose in towards the apex, cannot find the desired line for turn number 9, and so instead he's on the outside of the long double apex right-hander. He's washed out wide. Is that the opportunity that Christoph Peterson has been looking for all the way through? The German in the big Bentley, challenging now for 4th position. That could well be the respite needed for Sergei Tamara to just about hold on to this one. Your winner of the first ever race here in the Pro Series is Fabian Guilot. A fantastic drive from him, dealing with the pressure, dealing with a bad start. Second place will go the way of Jakob Knudsen. For third, Sergei Tamara is just about going to cling on. He pulls to the inside, weaves on the run up to the straight, celebrates a well-earned podium. Fourth goes the way of Martin Varga. 5th is Christoph Peterson. Just outside that top 5 is Matt Townsend. Further down the order, we've still got battles galore. In semi-pro, we're expecting Sepe to come through in the 550 McLaren for the class victory. We're expecting Wazowicz to come through for 2nd place, but it may not be quite so easy for 3rd, because here is Taran. We ride on board. The Ukrainian, having been in a fight all the way through this with Wazowicz. Wazowicz, who's led him, but is now behind. You're looking at the 2 Mustangs. That Ferrari's in the pro class, but it's getting involved. It's forced the Mustang out wide. Contact. Taran, door to door, is forced all the way into the runoff at turn number 9. For a moment, the number 101 was on course for a class podium, but that has allowed Wazowicz to slip back up the inside once again. Surely not a position change. Gabriel Schmidt, I do apologize, it is that slipped back up the inside for possibly 3rd position here in the semi-pros. He's closing up on the back of Donkervelk. Donkervelk is holding up his teammate here. Is there going to be a last-minute lunge from Taran? Closing in. He's going for the exit. The Mustang bubbles, bounces, bobs over the curb. It's not quite going to be enough, however, in the semi-pro class. 3rd place will go the way of Gabriel Schmidt. There'll be talks and discussions about that one. 2 Toga cars getting involved with an independent, and the full order is confirmed. Your winner was Fabian Guilot from Jakob Knudsen, Sergei Tamara completing your overall podium. 4th going to Christoph Peterson, 5th Callum Jones, and 6th the Liam Nissan of Limburgs. 7th goes the way of Oreshkin, 8th. Due course. What a fantastic race we had in that one then. It was Knudsen who led away from Paul, let us not forget. Nedorazov slipping out wide in the first corner, trying to gain a number of positions, and actually just up the road, you'll see the Nissan he ended up battling with through much of the race. He was creeping his way up past the 12 of Wazowicz in that early phase as well, and if you spot just in the top of shot an Aston Martin green and black, that was your eventual race winner, Fabian, dropping down the order, and indeed it looked to be an all McLaren affair for the opening stages of the race. And the Aston Martin was the only one to disturb the party, at least in its finality, albeit we did see Martin Varga come round close in the closing stages. So, we are expecting to have some interviews for this one. We've got a couple of drivers sitting ready and waiting, in fact. So we'll first of all pull in a certain Mr. Martin Varga. Martin, I mean, talk to us about that race. You were fighting for the podium, then you were back down again, and then you almost got it at the finish. What was it like from the cockpit?
Oh, tough. Like, probably even tougher than my last race. But it was brilliant. It was the best race I had. I'm happy with P4. I'm frustrated I didn't get P3, but it is what it is. I still accept the result.
And talk to me about your prep for this, because if I'm correct, you were originally signed up for the Pro-Am class and then got a late promotion into Pro. Now, your pace suggests that that was more than correct, but were you expecting to be there, or was that something that was sprung upon you late on?
Well, I signed up to this series probably a month ago
Yeah.
after I wrapped up the Rookie Wednesday Championship, at which point I was still amp pace.
Mm.
And then I had a race last weekend where I qualified P2 between pro drivers and then somehow was keeping up with the P1 pro car and almost overtaking him. And then I thought, at this point, I'm not amp pace, I'm pro.
Yes. And I tell you what, I think everybody watching will have agreed with that assessment, because it was absolutely fantastic to see you in full flow, shall we say, all the way through that one. Next time, maybe it'll be a podium. Are you looking forward to the rest of the championship?
I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. I'm hoping I'll have these races every week. They're
You
so
got an
much
eye on a
fun.
track?
I'm not too sure what the calendar is.
Well, you got lots to look forward to then, shall we say. I think
Yeah,
we're going Red Bull Ring next and Bathurst not too long after that. Good luck in your preparation for that. Thank you for joining us.
thank you. Have a good evening.
Next up, I tell you what, we've got a really good interview sitting here, because we've got the option to talk to Gabriel Schmidt, who, of course, pinched that Pro-Am podium right at the end. Now, that is subject to official confirmation, but for now, let's welcome in Gabriel Schmidt. I mean, tell me about that one, because you were in third for almost all of the second stint. For a moment, it was taken away from you, and yet at the line, you've managed to reclaim it.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I didn't even know I was in P3, so I just looked and I hope to be in P3. Uh, I mean, it was pretty hard. I had some technical issues, so not a lot of practice, but in the end it worked for me.
And then in terms of, I suppose, how the race played out, because obviously you were in that fight for a long time. Was that, do you think, affecting the overall pace? Like, could you have challenged the top two if the gap wasn't there?
Yeah, definitely. Also, it was a pretty hard fight, but it was clean, it was fun. But without it, I would have probably got P2.
Yeah, well, you got lots to look forward to then. It's a long championship and a good start to it nonetheless. There's nothing to frown about that podium. Provisionally. It's all provisional, of course, for anybody
Yeah,
listening. Thank you very much, Gabriel. I hope to see you in future weeks, and good luck with your prep for the next one.
yeah, thank you. Bye.
So that was Gabriel. He was third place in the Pro-Am category. I was hoping we could get the chance to talk to second place, although they don't quite seem to be here yet. So we'll go straight to your Pro-Am winner. That, of course, being the number 550 McLaren, driven by Sepe Lagoon. Talk to me. I mean, that race for you there, Sepe, it was really, really exciting. A couple of battles at various points, but then in the last minute, you had the opportunity to get yourself up to that class victory and possibly the best start you could have asked for.
Repeat the question, I was muted.
Ah, yes, of course. Don't worry. The race for you, it was a first and start of the second stint too, with plenty of battles. There was a penalty in there, and yet at the end, you just seemed to have the pace.
In the end, I was lucky that Mustang crashed. He crashed with a Porsche, I think. But yeah, otherwise I wouldn't get him. He had much damage, but his car was way faster on straight. So I was lucky that he crashed and I got damaged. So
Is that straight line speed something you'll be thinking about going forwards? Because obviously we've got Red Bull Ring, a lot of straights there. We've got Bathurst, and then we've got Spa. So is that something that you're concerned about, or does it get balanced out at these other tracks?
concerned about it on Red Bull Ring, but on Bathurst I don't really concern because there is a lot of turns on Bathurst as well, and that's a McLaren more suitable. So I don't know. We'll see. I will definitely practice a bit more for this race, for next races. But yeah,
Perfect. Well, good luck in those races. Thank you very much for putting on such a show for us. And fingers crossed, Bathurst comes very, very soon, and Red Bull Ring is not too much damage because you've got a great start to the championship.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up, I can see waiting for us, we've got Mitchell Sterenberg. So we'll pull in Mitchell for a bit of a chat. Mitchell, talk to us about that one, because we saw you at various points in the race, and it seemed like there was never a dull moment.
I was everywhere this race. Yeah, let's start at the start. Okay, qualifying P16, not bad, not good. Got taken out into the last corner, so that was quite annoying. Was last at that point, and then everything happened.
And, you know, obviously we say everything happened. Was there an overtaking hotspot for you? Was there something you were consistently trying to set up, or was it just whatever you could get your hands on?
I think mostly doing a switchback into the from the first to the second corner, and I mean I'm in a Nissan, so of course the straight.
And with that in mind, I mean, just a moment ago we were speaking to some of the Pro-Am podium finishers. Are you looking forward to particularly Red Bull Ring, but also, you know, that long straight at Spa and Conrad at Bathurst? They come to mind as spots that would make you quite happy.
Yeah, Red Bull Ring and Spa I'm very excited for. Bathurst not that much, because I had a mini endurance race at Bathurst and my pace was nowhere to be found, so still need to work on that. But yeah, Red Bull and Spa, they're gonna be fun.
We'll have to keep an eye out for you at Red Bull Ring. Like you say, this was a race of damage limitation. I reckon next week it's going to be a bit more Nissan in the front of the order. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I hope so. Yeah, I expect to be there. This was mostly a race what could have been, but I think I had the pace to be around the top. But yeah, just not in the end, sadly.
Well, very much good luck for next week. Are we going to see you in, for example, the 24 and 2.4 this weekend?
Not the 24 and 2.4. I have a 12-hour race at Spa to practice for this week.
And are you using the Nissan there?
No, I don't do that to my teammates.
Well, I was going to say it's plenty of practice for later on in this Pro Series Season 1, but maybe you'll have to jump across between the cars. And, well, if you drive the Nissan, something tells me you probably love the Nissan.
Of course I do. It's my favorite car. I mean, it's the only reason why I drive it, and it's fun. It's very fun.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to come and join us in the commentary box, and good luck with the rest of the season.
All right, thank you very much.
Last up for now, that's not to say that anybody else isn't going to join, but last up for now, we've got Sergey Tamara from Simhaven. That, of course, for Sergey was a ridiculous race. I mean, talk us through that one, because there was a point where you looked as if you were odds on to win the whole thing in stint 1. Then the pace faded, and then it came back towards you in the final stint, only to have Martin Vargas sniffing away at you for the last lap or so.
Yeah, quite exciting race on the lie. I wasn't even expecting I'm gonna be up there, to be honest. I think Knudsen had some type of an issue because I passed him easily on the straight at the first lap, but yeah, I wasn't expecting to have the pace for tonight, honestly. So I was quite surprised. I was defending easily for P1, but then I just saw the Aston blasting like mid 53s, and I knew I was cooked basically. So yeah, I just decided to not defend, not risk anything, and yeah, keep the safe P3. Like I had a pretty clean pit stop, which put me like 5 seconds in front of Varga. But despite that, like I was on 3 warnings too, so I was just taking it very easy at the end.
Yes, very, very understandable. Track limits here certainly a factor. They're a factor as well when we go to Red Bull Ring next week. You said you weren't expecting to have the pace here this weekend, or this tonight rather. Is that something, you know, Red Bull Ring, have your expectations changed a little bit? Are you thinking championship now, or is that far too long term?
I mean, considering there are a few tracks I really like at the end of the championship, I'm feeling like as long as I keep it quite consistent in these first few rounds, I think the championship is on definitely.
Well, we shall keep an eye on it. Good luck. We'll try not curse you too early on. We'll keep the camera off in qualifying if that's the case. And thank you very much for taking the time to join us here in the commentary box.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for hosting again, and see you next round.
See you next friend. That just about does us for the interviews, I believe, and it leaves us with the most important thing to do, which is to thank each and every person that tuned in here, be it on TikTok, Twitch, or YouTube. It is all of you that make it possible to be a part of the Toga family. If you liked what you saw, you can get involved. If you're thinking Pro Championship, sign-ups are still available. You could try and join from round number 2. If you're wanting a one-off event, we touched on it a moment ago, the SPA 24 in 2.4 is a special event this weekend where we're going to run a 10 times time multiplier. So over a 2.4 hour race, you get a full cycle of conditions, both night and day. And in turn, next week, we get the return of the Rookies Championship. So if you're thinking the lap times look a bit too hot for you here, but you still want to join in and have some fun with our fantastic community, all of the information is available over on SimGrid. You'll also have to join the Discord. And from there, you'll make lots and lots of friends. All that's left to say then is thank you very much. I hope you have a lovely evening. And we shall see you come the weekend for the SPA 24 in 2.4. If you don't see us then, we hope to see you next week for round number 2 of the Pro Series Season 1.